today's topic is all about dashboards. Some say they're dead. Some say they're immortal. What do we think about it, Eric? Why don't you hit us with the meme of the week to get us kicked off?
All right, so this video is what happens when you try to create a dashboard for every single use case, whether or not it's actually appropriate.
Homer, I found this behind the radiator. I really think you should throw it away.
Suggestion noted. Marge, I'd like to be alone with the sandwich for a moment.
Are you going to eat it?
Yes. Oh.
You look terrible.
I don't care. This is all your fault! Oh, how can I stay mad at you?
All right.
Don't be Homer.
Yeah, don't be Homer. Okay, so to talk about this today, we have a really great guest, a good friend of mine. We go back a ways, Ollie and I, and we're really excited to have him here today. So it's Ollie Hughes. He is the CEO of Count, and Count is an analytics front-end tool. I hesitate to call it a BI tool, although it fills that function really well because it does a bit of data engineering, a lot of really cool things. But Count is a really awesome tool that we love here at Super Data Brothers. And so we're happy to have Ollie on to talk about the front end and dashboards and where do we go from here. But before we do, a quick word from our sponsors.
Us.
That's right, the Super Data Brothers. We can help you if you are struggling to come up with a persuasive, effective analytics front end that makes real impact and delivers ROI for your organization and your customers. We are here to help. So reach out to us at the email address down below and let us know how we can be of assistance.
Well,
there we go. All right, it's a live show. It wouldn't be a live show without some goofs. So, Abdul, hello from London. Good to see you. Good to see you. Thanks for coming today. All right, so we are going to bring Ollie on. Here we go. Ollie, welcome. Good to see you, man.
welcome.
Hey guys, nice to see you.
All right.
I'm ready for this.
All right, good. So why don't you, before we dive into kind of the meat of it, why don't you just kind of let people know a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Count?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ollie. I'm one of the co-founders of Count. My co-founder is also called Ollie. He's our CTO. We have been going for 4 or 5 years, trying to tackle this challenge of sort of how should the front end of the analytics stack look and how does that work and how do you make collaboration really great. Yeah, we're based we're most of us a free remote company, but we're mostly centralized around London. A lot of our team used to be in London, and now we're sort of more geographically diverse. Yeah, and I have 2 kids, two little boys. One's 6, one's 4, which makes me a very busy man with lots of bags under my eyes. And yeah, that's really joy. And a bit like Ryan and Eric, I also like gaming. And my secret passion post-COVID has been to game on my Wednesday nights. Yeah, it doesn't count. I think Count. Yeah, so thanks for the introduction, Ryan. I think Count is quite hard to categorize. We almost would say it's its own category because we describe it as like a data exploration tool for the modern data stack, as in it's this big leap here is that we have this kind of collaborative canvas where you can do a lot of different data use cases in a collaborative way, but like Miro or Figma, but for data analytics. So you can do requirements gathering in there. You can do your entire analytical process in there, from requirements gathering, planning a project, data engineering, exploratory analytics, and storytelling, all the way through to dashboarding. And I guess crucially, using it to make a decision rather than just using it as a place to see numbers, which is sort of the big challenge of most of the tools in the market to date. So we've been going at that we sort of made that pivot about a year ago and launched the canvas in September. It's been going really well. It's been amazing to see people who get that principle, like loving the kind of flexibility that the product gives. Really fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to kick us off with today is just this idea. You kind of mentioned dashboards, and dashboards have been the default front end for analytics for a long time. Really, kind of when Tableau hit the scene in the late 2000s and really kind of took over the enterprise world in the early 2010s. It's just been, no matter what you're working on, your default assumption and the assumption of your users is, hey, and then we're going to build a dashboard, right? And that process has become, I think, pretty stale. And there's this gap between kind of where the data engineering piece has evolved and where the BI piece has kind of stayed stuck in this default dashboard world. And so that's led to a lot of people. You see it every once in a while. Dashboards are dead. Dashboards are dead. Dashboards are dead. And it's,
Yeah.
you know,
why are they saying that?
why do people say that? What do they mean?
Yeah, I think we have a part to play there. I think Ryan, you know, Taylor, our head of product, and she wrote an article back in 2020 over the Easter weekend, which was called "Dashboards Are Dead" and went absolutely crazy. It was a complete viral explosion over the Easter weekend. People were just discussing that topic. So we've seen it used. That term, we think we coined it. Well, maybe we didn't, but we certainly helped amplify it. And I've seen lots of other tools pick up that kind of marketing slogan, right? And it's a bit trite. I don't think dashboards are dead. Like, they're not dead. That is an oversimplification of the challenge. I think the way we see it is that they are used in many ways where they should not be. They are one of many things you need to communicate and work with data and use data effectively in your organization. And the previous generation of BI they've been a one solution fits all a thing, and that's not the case. You can't be effective that way. So dead is not true. Dying or reducing in frequency definitely needs to happen. Like, that is undeniably the case. They are too rigid a tool for many of the use cases that people now need to use them for.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry to keep talking forever, but part of that is just the fact that if you think about the evolution of data strategy in organizations, the key fundamental requirement was just to get numbers out into the wild, like to get numbers out of a database or out of a system and make them seen so you could have data-driven decision making. And that meant the getting a dashboard out there was a massive step forward, and we shouldn't deny that. Like, Tableau has done an amazing job of pushing forward, so you can always see a number. And that was I would say, I always call that like the first stage. Like, getting numbers out there was really, really important. But now we're at a point where you have dashboards at your ears, and you're still not making the decisions you should be making, and that the next evolution should be about moving away from dashboards being the only source which you're using to work with numbers. And I think that's why we built one of these. We built Count. I think is that we find people just crying out for a different way to work.
Yeah. No, I that's what first attracted me to Count. In fact, it was that article. It was the Dashboards Are Dead article that you mentioned that Taylor wrote that I remember sitting on my couch upstairs. My office is in the basement dungeon here, but sitting on my couch upstairs, mindlessly scrolling Google's article suggestions for me and seeing this one called Dashboards Are Dead and thinking, well, that's pretty interesting, actually. What is that? And so a couple of things. So a few comments. We've got one from Miko, friend of the show, Miko Yuck.
Hello, Miko.
Yes. OMG, Ryan, is that your brother? Are you guys twins? So I don't know if that is a compliment to me or an insult to Eric.
We are not twins.
No,
we are brothers, though.
It could be both those things, actually, couldn't it? It could be both a negative to Ryan and a positive to both ways. It could work.
Yeah. Yep. It's funny. We get asked this. If we go in cycles of how much our haircuts and beards resemble one another, and so sometimes we're in sync, and we get asked if we're twins a lot, and then other times not so much.
Other times, some people will be like, I didn't think you guys were related at all. You guys don't look anything alike. In the same day, two different people. One person will be like, you guys don't look anything alike. The next person will be, are you guys twins? It's like, no, we're related.
You're definitely alike.
So Abdul asks, are we going to get a live demonstration of Count? And so that is something that I think, I don't know if you're up for it, Ollie.
That wasn't the plan.
It was not the plan. So we'll see. Maybe we could show some examples of things you could do instead of a dashboard, some quick examples. But before we dive into that, one of my questions for you is like, okay, before we spend the next 45 minutes trashing them, what is the best steelman argument for a dashboard? Like, when do you actually want to use it, and it's the appropriate front end?
That's interesting. Yeah, I feel about this a lot, as you can probably imagine. And like, the analogy I love to talk about generally is like, dashboards are like trying to use a hammer for all your DIY tasks. Like, clearly there are some tasks where like a hammer is really, really important, and there are some tasks which is completely inappropriate for, and it's the same thing. You need a toolkit of different ways to communicate numbers. A dashboard is best for like hammering a nail for very direct, very clear, very operational like decision making. So the way I put it is like where you have no ambiguity about what the numbers mean. There's no lack of context. Everyone understands what sales means, for example, and you have people looking at it frequently to make very operational decisions. I think at that point where they are looking at things quickly, trying to make a quick steer, where there's no discussion required, and that is the ideal of a dashboard. And I guess that works well for driving a car in a factory. When you're managing a factory, a nuclear power plant, you've got a dashboard there of like numbers everyone understands. That is the sweet spot for a dashboard. It is quick, simple, and visually impactful. You can quickly see an operational alert or operational change. That would be the sweet spot for a dashboard. Now, we use it way more than that, but that is what it's for.
Yeah, absolutely. There's in fact, in my blog, in our blog, shameless plug, superdatablog.substack.com. Check it out. This is something I talked about in a blog post I released on Tuesday, was really what are dashboards for? And I agree with you completely. It's that operational use case where you understand the metrics, you understand what impact you're trying to have with them. You've got business alignment on what is to be done based on the numbers. And then when all that lines up, you're in a good position to have a dashboard to monitor, are we executing the plan, and is it having the intended impact? They're great for that.
They're great for creating questions as well. That's the other thing they're great for. So like the classic thing is a dashboard just creates, or they're question creators. Why does that number drop? Why has that number gone up? Why is that number wrong? They just create, they're the starting point to a lot of other analysis too, which then often sadly doesn't get answered well in a dashboard. But they're the starting point.
Now, do you think, is it possible, and I know what you're going to say to this, but is it possible to gather all the right requirements up front to make sure, to head off those questions, right? Like, is it just a question of, okay, data teams need a better form to get the requirements, and then the dashboard will not become an ad hoc question generating machine? Or is it just inherent in the presentation style?
I mean, I don't think you want it. I don't think you want that. I think the last thing, I think there's a really, we've heard it a few times, which we're really scared of, this kind of desire for data teams to move away from the business and be like less contact, less conversation, less communication, have less questions answered. Don't get me wrong, you want to have basic questions sorted, and but having no questions is a complete nightmare because it means nothing's changing, nothing's moving, nothing's improving, nothing's being discovered. So I think it's all about what questions are being asked. You want to avoid basic questions if you can, because obviously it just takes an analyst's time up, and people would prefer to answer themselves if it's that basic. But yeah, the last thing you want is to avoid questions, and that also comes down to requirements, right? To work out how to get a dashboard right first time, it should never be right first time. It should always be evolving as your business evolves. So I think that's the big mistake, is thinking that you need to do an upfront process and just waterfall develop a dashboard to finish. What the hell? That never worked anywhere else. I'd like to work here. But unfortunately, tools are often set up that way, that you have this kind of situation where the analyst has their own development environment, which is just their own sandbox, and they can only present numbers in this kind of pristine environment, which is like a read-only website page where people can look at it. And the grand reveal, as we call it, it always fails basically, because there's no way that a person who's going to trust these numbers for their own job and their own business is going to just take a sales number and go well, how is that number derived? How have you got to that number? What does this number mean? And you need to share more of the process. That's one of the big things that I think, let alone the end output type, but you need to share more of how you're building something. That's super important.
Yep. All right. So then, instead of a dashboard, what else could you build?
Is that a great?
I think that's basically the topic of this entire webinar.
In a collaborative space where you can both do requirements gathering, you can do exploration, data modeling to get data correct, validate that, and then presentation build, and then discuss real time what you're finding, and branching off that initial report is the place to be, which is what a canvas is for. I guess we actually originally started, just to share some history. We originally started building Count as a notebook tool, we wanted to build a way of helping analysts communicate long form reports. And we had some success with that. And you can see a lot of notebook tools out in the market now, and good luck to them. But we just found that even doing long form reports wasn't sufficiently good enough to cover the range of use cases you might want to answer questions with. So just having a dashboard and a notebook tool isn't enough. There's so many use cases that doesn't help with. And so we built the canvas to not only support the breadth of like end outputs you can build, like a funnel, for example, or a process flow map with numbers in it, or a dashboard or metric hierarchy tree, which I can show in a second if you want. But actually help the process of building those reports be far more iterative, far more collaborative, and avoid like that kind of grand reveal step when people go, well, this is great, but I don't understand any of these numbers, and that number looks wrong, and why does it look this way? Can you please add the following charts into it? Like, it just creates so much extra work.
I was the grand reveal. I just want to highlight that for a moment, because that is so often what happens with dashboard development, is that you work towards the grand reveal of, we did all this data engineering work, we've been doing all this stuff, and now here's the dashboard. What do you think? And I was talking to one of my clients yesterday. It's another consulting firm that I partner with, and they were talking about how they recently revealed a dashboard to the CEO of a company. And it was a big win. It was all these metrics brought together for the first time, classic dashboard use case. And it was just immediately like, this is great. So what do we do? What do we do based on this? What decision am I supposed to make? How do I, now I got this numbers, now what, right? And so that's the danger of like that, working forever just to throw up a dashboard that just has a bunch of charts crammed together on a screen with no context, no narrative, no anything. It's a real problem. So I see in the comments too, we've got some people clamoring for a demo. And so I don't know, like we said, we weren't planning on a demo, but maybe if you have some examples,
sure.
like the metrics tree is a great one. I would love to share the metrics tree with my audience. I could spend the rest of the show talking about the metrics tree and why you need to build one, which we won't do, but let's at least take a look at it if you're up for it. You should see the present button down in the center of the screen.
Ollie, if you need a minute to get stuff.
No. I demo all day. I can do this till I'm blue in the face. Let me see what I can share. So this is just one of the examples of like, this is the canvas UI here. If you can see this is a canvas. So the canvas is, if you've used things like Miro or any sort of any sort of collaborative tool, it's like a massive white canvas space where you have your daily menu and your data on the right left hand side, and you've got ability to add in comments and stuff on the bottom. But the kind of things it lets you build and then you can share as a report, the flexibility of it is things like this metric tree, like a hierarchy of numbers. So it's amazing to me, actually, think about how businesses function. Businesses are basically a collection of people working in a hierarchy, running processes. And yet we never present numbers in the way that the organization works, which is a hierarchy. So this is just a simple example of showing revenue broken down by the levers that drive revenue, the levers of growth. And this kind of metric tree is so much clearer how everything fits together, how these numbers relate. It's just a really powerful way to articulate what's going on in your business, and you can answer more questions that way. And this is obviously just built in a canvas. It's just literally laying these numbers out in a flexible way. It's one of the big answers there, really. I will then move on to another example, which is a bit more product related if you're in SaaS. So this is an onboarding funnel. Again, a funnel of numbers. And if you think about how you would how a dashboard would try and help you articulate how the staging of your like conversion of your like onboarding funnel or payment funnel would look, it would just be a bar chart with different points in it. Here you can see you've got numbers which are live in your database, which you can cut and slice different ways, alongside the actual physical like screenshots of your app, so you can completely get how the conversion fits into the wider context. And I think this is the kind of stuff which when we thought about moving away from a notebook into a canvas, we're like, these are the kind of things which really is about contextualization. It's not just about writing a narrative, writing a report. It's about putting numbers in any way it makes sense to articulate them. And that's really what we're trying to do with this. And so this is just the kind of flexibility of how a canvas can help you present better. But in reality, the real win for the product is not in just the end output you end up with. It's the fact you can iterate it and get there with people. So here you can see the actual numbers driving this report. And obviously, you don't want to show this every time to every single person in your organization. But when you have to explain how you've got there and you're working through with your stakeholder to show them what you're doing, the logic you're working through, the assumptions you're building in, you can do this in the canvas instantly. And it's the fact that that you can work across not just your end output, but you can do your data modeling here as well. And you can also do requirements gathering, sketch out the ideas behind the report, how it's going to work in the same place. Your entire production, your entire workflow, the entire project is within one canvas. That's the real power of it, because then you can move between these different areas and get confidence and trust as you go from the rest of the business. So that's the demo, I guess. That's the quick 2-minute demo that you surprised me with, which is hopefully did a good enough job.
No, that was great. I think we got we've got some feedback from people. You can see Abdul says, this is incredible. I need to push this tool in my new job I'm starting next week. So
thanks, Abdul. That's really kind.
Yeah. Count.co. That's important, right? Count.co.
Or just email me at ollie@count.co.
Yep.
You know.
And Martin, friend of the show, Martin, Count is a revolutionary new way how to do analytics. So I don't want to turn this into a product advertisement, but I do agree. I really philosophically agree that like there has been so much change. If you look at the evolution of roles in the industry, okay, data engineering wasn't a thing not that long ago. Analytics engineering wasn't. People were doing a lot of those tasks, but the way that they kind of coalesced into a discrete role it was driven by a lot of tooling changes and advances in how are we going to build data pipelines, right? Where are we going to house it? The move from on-prem warehouse appliances to cloud-based storage, and the advent of DBT and all sorts of stuff that drove that change. But then the front end of it, it's just the same thing we've been doing forever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was actually my journey. Actually, like I used to be like a data analytics as a consultant, and I just was amazed at all these different companies I go into, and they all had different color of tool. Let's talk about those colors. There were green, there was multicolored blue, and then there was yellow. Guess what those tools were? And they were basically the same. Like the way you built the chart was basically the same. They were all just the design paradigm was always exactly the same. And I just couldn't believe that we this like massive industry was talking about how it was driving decision making had just so normalized around one particular paradigm, and it was just this couldn't be the best we could do. That's really what drove Ollie and I to start thinking about this. Was just thinking about there must be a better solution than this than just simply dashboards for everything.
So one thing I'm interested in too is you kind of talked about the collaboration. How important is it, do you think, for data teams to start planning for effective feedback loops as part of the data presentation, right?
Well, it already happens. I mean, that's the joke here, right? Is that the feedback loop is already happening. It's just currently a massive pain in the ass. Like that's the honest.
Oh yeah.
So the business needs to know this information. It needs to get to the right answer. That driving force is already there. It's just that the feedback loop is really painful because there's no medium which you can actually discuss and wrestle with what these numbers mean, what's going on here, what's the follow up, and that's the real challenge. Is like data tools are so rigid. They are so rigid. If you think about the actual task we're talking about here of like, what's the problem definition? What's the requirements? How do we solve this problem? Let's go do some exploratory analytics and find out what we can see. Oh, well, that's interesting. What do we do with that? All these questions don't exist in the BI tool because the BI tool can do query, chart, present. It just does. It's literally they're just glorified chart makers, right? They just let you see a number very well. That's a very important part of it, but it doesn't support all the discussion or the iteration that goes on around the outside. So I would say that the answer is, Ryan, that people already know that's happening. And it's just the problem is it's not supported in an efficient way, and therefore it's hugely painful and people hate it. And really that is the engine room of decision making. That's the engine room of making progress. It's the engine room of making stuff happen. So when we hear about people saying like I want to avoid having questions from the business, I'm like, I understand where that's coming from completely. And you want to avoid low value questions, but you want to get engaged with as hard as you can on the high value questions. And you want a workflow which supports that. And, that doesn't come from an efficient ticketing system. It comes from like really working out how to problem solve with businesses, with the stakeholders, and make that a kind of a problem solve rather than just a number generation exercise.
A quick comment here from friend of the show, Nick. Good to see you, Nick. He just says, great job, Ryan, Eric, and Ollie. This looks amazing. So very positive. I know I hit you with a surprise demo, but
If I just say it to everyone, genuinely, this was it sounds like it's been completely made up, but Ryan told me like I am not going to demo your tool in this session, so fair play. The pressure.
Yeah, I did say that. Well, it was Miko. Miko started clamoring for a demo, and I can't say no to Miko. And so,
no one can.
So one of the things you mentioned earlier, this idea of like this tendency that you've seen, and I've seen it too, among data teams, in some ways to want to pull back from the business in a way. I'm curious, what do you think is driving that? Because one thing that I see, or a hypothesis I have, is that data teams have a really hard time. They get flooded with questions, and they have a really hard time setting up a practice that allows them to like focus on the important ones and not get lost in the deluge of like, can I see this by quarter? Why is this chart going up? That sort of thing.
Well, yeah, so you want to avoid those. You want to get into the... I think it's about positioning yourself away from just being... It's a hard thing, right? It's a very hard thing. I understand why people want to pull away. I think actually DBT have just launched, literally today, like their first annual report on analytics and engineering. And then one of the takeaways from that, which I haven't read it yet, so this is the headline I've seen, is that data people find that their work is more valued the further away from business they are. And the closer they are, the more frustrated they get. And that's a really sad thing. That's a really, really sad thing, because data teams are ultimately service teams, right? They support the business. So if you're moving away from people who are supporting, that doesn't sound right. And I really think that the goal here is to build trust. The goal here of the data team is to avoid having low-level questions, is to be seen as more than a SQL person writing SQL queries for someone else and being seen as problem solvers. And I think that's the real challenge, and that's the real opportunity, is that for data analysts to be considered to be not just people who produce numbers that get consumed or understood by the people, but to be seen as problem solvers. And in reality, like if the tools don't help here, like though you can't blame a tool for that kind of cultural shift. Like if your BI tool is literally like an analyst just produces a report which you can view, you see the analyst doing it as a person who just produces stuff that you view. Whereas if you have a tool which supports you to see the analyst working with you, showing you the process of how they got to an answer, you will see them differently. You'll see the value of the work they provide, and you can actually help them. They can help you solve the problem faster. And I think that's the real opportunity area, is to be seen as a problem solvers rather than just mechanical Turks at the keys producing charts. And that's the real danger zone, I think. That's a long answer to your question. Hope that was helpful.
No, it was good. It was good. One of the things that I'm curious about your perspective on too is just the overall evolution of BI. Like, what does it mean to do BI going forward? I think we agree, and you've heard over the course of this, those of you who are watching, that we're kind of at the end of an era maybe that was defined by the dashboard and churning out really great looking visualizations quickly in response to questions that came in. And that's certainly not going to go away as a BI function. But how do you think in the modern business, what is it that BI needs to do going forward in order to stay relevant?
That is a good question. I can tell you what my hope for it, I think I mentioned it a bit before, is that you have this, I think, really important wave of treating data teams more like software engineering. So that's the kind of the analytics engineering concept of like, let's adopt the appropriate aspects of software engineering and bring more rigor into and definition and sort of into the data modeling aspect of the data stack. So there's less chaos at the end. I think where I think we're early to the game on this, but I hope is a kind of market shift, is when you realize you have a much more locked down data model, when you realize you have more safety, the lineage of your query is now much shorter, is much less from raw data to an answer in a dashboard. It's much more, there's a lockdown stage in between that. You can enable a much more flexible way to work with data. And that's the opportunity areas that you don't have to worry about that dashboard being locked down and static and rigorous, which it was when it was doing a lot of work in that BI tool. Suddenly becomes less of a less of a need and is more of a constraint, and you can be much more flexible with it. And I think, as I said before, I think the opportunity area is that data is much more of a malleable content format. It's actually a thing you can work with rather than just watch from a business perspective. And I think that's what I'm hoping for, a much more flexible top end of the stack, where we talk about the last mile of analytics. It's really like you are working with numbers, wrestling with the numbers to make a decision rather than looking at numbers and going away and solving a problem over here in a different tool. And so that's what I really hope will change. And I think that will also change the perception of data analysts hugely. And that's what I really aspire to, is that data analyst is not a gateway to being a data engineer, but it's actually a gateway to being one of the most valuable members of the organization. I was on that point, actually, I was speaking to a head of data of a really big startup about back last year, and he was telling me that though he hires analysts are generally cheaper to hire in terms of salary than data engineers, because data engineers usually are sort of more senior. The most expensive salaries in his organization were the top tier analysts. Data analysts who are excellent are worth way more than any other role in his data organization. Isn't that a fascinating idea? Because they're so trusted and they understand the business so well that they are able to drive such substantial change in the organization, which is, I mean, they're so valuable as an individual. I think that's such an aspiring fact for me to think about. Is like, how can I get more analysts to be at that point? How can we get more analysts to be so valued by the business they're paid more than other people? I think that's a trend which is not going to be quick, but it's a really exciting one for me. And that's what I think a lot about, is how do we not that counts just for analysts, by the way. Like, we have lots of data engineers in our tool too, because collaboration is important across the entire data stack. But that's the opportunity area, I think, for BI, is to just be increasingly valued as a problem solving function, not just a reporting function.
Yeah, here we have a comment. Being able to keep dashboards relevant is a struggle, and keeping the engagement/feedback loop moving is very important to focus on changing business requirements. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how many organizations have you either worked with them for the first time and they don't know how many dashboards they have, and they don't know how many dashboards are being used, and there are potentially thousands of dashboards that aren't being used by anyone, and maybe they never needed it in the first place, or the use case went away, or maybe they needed one little thing tweaked, and their only method of feedback was to submit a ticket, and maybe start a 2-month back and forth, which ultimately might not be worth it.
Yeah, I think that is always the challenge, isn't it? Data teams still have to prioritize very carefully what they work on, and that is still always a requirement to prioritize well. But in terms of like the number of dashboards that you have out there, I think it's just the sign of this is just that it's such a rigid form that you have such proliferation, because you've got to have a dashboard for every small use case is a dashboard, and you just get every small request gets a dashboard. You just get this increasingly huge pile of dashboards because you're trying to serve businesses with the wrong tool. One of our clients, that metric tree I showed you earlier, they managed to build a metric tree which was sufficiently powerful they could remove 50 dashboards from their organization for one metric tree. Like,
that's awesome.
That isn't a metric necessarily of success, but it just shows you quite the proliferation you can have when you're presenting in the wrong medium.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And so many dashboards are, it's like a loaf of bread. You have one dashboard for each slice. Here's the same data, but it's a little tweaked. And then here's the same data, but it's a little tweaked again. Or, one thing I find that I advise people is like, if you're one of the signs, and I'm curious if you have any others, but like the signs when you're building a dashboard that actually you need to stop and ask whether or not a different presentation would better suit your needs. And one of the ones that I see a lot is you're fulfilling some data request and you're struggling to figure out what to put on the screen. Like, there's this pressure to fill the screen up with charts because you've got this bounded area. And if it's not full, it's going to look like you didn't do that much work, right? So it's got to be full. And so what are you going to put on it, right? Like that, if you're feeling that, I think that's a big sign. That's your intuition telling you to take a step back and ask if there's a better presentation style. I don't know if you have any other signs that maybe you should consider something other than a dashboard.
See, Ryan, what I always do in that situation is just put one big list at the bottom.
Yeah, half the dashboard is a giant list of the details.
Dashboard is a giant table with the details, and then it fills it up. You really only need one chart. You've got the chart. It's like, so if you have to make a dashboard and I mean, that's as a person who actively develops reports for an organization. That's what I do.
Well, you also recognize that most people just download the data to a CSV, Eric, and you just make sure.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing you've always got to keep in mind is like, okay, can this export to CSV? And because they're going to. So
yeah, well, exactly. And I think that ultimately is always a good thing, right? People want the data they want to consume.
Yeah.
That's a great thing. It's just like it's obviously just a challenge of are people getting what they need in the right format. I think to answer your question right about is a dashboard appropriate? The kind of really crazy thing in my mind is when we talk about dashboard being like like as we say, like a grid of numbers, the answer is almost certainly never that's the right call. Like I think that's the kind of the massive shift that's going to be going on here is like the times that you have there's no ambiguity about what this data means, that you're using it operationally on a regular basis to drive decision making ongoing on the same dashboard is a very, very small part of how how organizations work, right? It's probably like a handful of core reports that need to be done on a dashboard. The rest can be solved a different way, be that long form report or a process flow diagram or a metric tree, and or it's some sort of hybrid working environment where you're trying to iterate through different questions all the time. And I think that's what's really scary is actually dashboards are probably the minority of the time you should be using a dashboard. I reckon is my personal view. But where I think that's most acute is where you definitely like the strongest signals why you shouldn't be using a dashboard is the problem I'm presenting or the thing I'm working on right now, does it have a high degree of ambiguity? Are we working through a problem? Do we actually know these are the right numbers? Are these just going to create more questions? If that's true, then there's probably more context, more clarification required than can be fit into a dashboard. Like ambiguity is a huge part of that because ultimately you're probably still solving a problem. The second one is like, do we need to have iteration? Is there iterative part of this? Are we trying to work through stuff with someone else? And again, then a dashboard is probably not the right thing to present. Or more importantly, do these numbers need to be explained? Like classic. Like, am I trying to explain or trying to make an argument with these numbers? If I'm trying to make a point with this, then it isn't the right point either. There's a few things to think about.
One of the conversations, I'm sure you've seen it on LinkedIn lately, it just kind of exploded, I think driven by the tech layoffs that have kind of rolled through the industry. When Eric and I went down to Texas for the Day-to-Day Texas conference, which is an awesome conference, by the way. If you get a chance to go, I suggest you check it out. But, there was a lot of talk about that. And it really focused on, okay, as a data team, how can we deliver value? Like, what does it look like? And there's one way to think about it that I think is the easy way for data teams, which is, we're delivering value by like, look at how many pipelines we've built, look at how many reports we have, look at how many users in the organization log in to our front end systems in any given month. Surely this is proof of value. And I just don't think that is maybe good enough during good times when money's cheap and the budget's high. But my question for you is like, how do you show value as a data team, and like what does that process look like from the front end's perspective? Like, what is there a way in which changing how we're presenting data to people can be part of that proof of value?
So I think there's a few answers to that question of like this question is how do data teams deliver value? One question. How can they show they're delivering value? Second question, I think, because the way they can deliver value is by helping solve the organization's biggest challenges. That is arguably one of their most important functions. I guess you obviously have people who do like analytics for delivery to product, like there's other requirements there. But when it comes to like the analyst function, the people doing internally focused use cases, the goal is to help the business solve the biggest problems that the business faces. And if you can prove that, you can do that and make that effective, that is the job done. This is why I think it comes back to the idea of like the mentality should be problem solving rather than report generation, because it's about how to help people move forwards and helping them like reach a better decision. That decision support was originally often the whole way it was described. That's still so relevant. It's such a forgotten term. The second part of that is what I think actually is increasingly a problem for like data engineering and analytics engineering as well, which is how do I show all the work I'm doing? There's no transparency to all the models I'm building, all the logic that's hidden away. The people can't see my process. They just see the end result. They have no idea if this dashboard took me 3 weeks or half an hour. And I think that's about visibility of workflow. And the solution, the opportunity there is that people will trust your work more if they can see what you've done. If you can show them the steps you've got there, if you can involve them in the process appropriately, if you can talk them through all the hypotheses that you tested that didn't go anywhere. Like, we only showed them the end result, show them all the stuff you didn't find. That's also really valuable. And that you can't do that in a dashboard, sadly, but that does require a more collaborative tool, I think, to help them see all the things you've done. But the goal here is to help them solve problems. And one of the ways to do that is to give them more trust in your work, which also helps them see the value of what you've built. And that's the real opportunity. If I could plug one thing, which is not a thing I've built, but a book I would recommend every analyst reads, it is this book called The Trusted Advisor. It's actually written for management consultants. It's like a management consultancy 101. If you want to be a management consultant, you read this book. It tells you how to be a trusted advisor. And the tenets of that book is like, you need to be trusted and have confidence of your client to help them really succeed. Like, you need to help them trust you to make them succeed. And that has to be the same thing true for data teams. You have to be trusted. The work you do needs to be just hugely valued because they know what you've done is great. And that is about building trust over time and showing what you've done. I'm good at these little monologue speeches. You should interrupt me. I keep talking too much.
No, it's good. It's really good. So what I'm wondering then is, let's say there's an analyst watching who is on a team and they're kind of in some of the situations we've discussed where it's, they don't feel like a trusted advisor. They feel like maybe they're under a lot of pressure to churn out low value dashboards or answer basic questions. Do you have any tips for that person about how can they go about moving in that direction, especially if the culture that has built up in the organization is, I turn to the data team and I just fire questions at them and they paste charts into Slack or something like that. How do you start to take those steps?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer can be very contextualized. Like, clearly, if the use case is quite important. If the CEO's like, I need a number now, always a terrible sign, by the way. But never an opportunity to thrive. But just got to answer the question. I think the key is to be helpful. I think, but no one is going to say no to you if you want to help them more. If you say, can I get 5 minutes of your time so I can give you I can show you how I'm thinking about breaking this problem down, or here's some other ways I've looked at this problem. Here's some different ways I've considered the problem to you. People are willing to have, particularly if you ask for it and you make it clear why it's going to be helpful to them, they're willing to give you more time to share and show more process. In reality, if they don't trust what you've done, they will ask more questions. And that's the opportunity then, is to shine and show more methodology and take some time to show the logic of how you've tackled the problem, how you've broken things down. Talk them through, I did this, then this, and this, and this is why these numbers are the following. And they're going to find that really helpful. And the more you do that, the more they'll trust the results you give them first time.
Yeah, here we have a quote from Paul. Good to see you, Paul. A data team that just answers questions is going to be replaced with ChatGPT. And so that, it's the hot topic, is the whole generative AI, large language model, the whole deal. Mm-hmm. Thanks to ChatGPT kind of blowing everyone's minds a couple months ago. What impact do you see ChatGPT having on BI and data analysis?
I hope it will remove a lot of the low-level questions they get answered, like that people just want to quickly get a number or cut a certain way. That'd be great. I think it's going to help. I think with everything in ChatGPT is going to do, it's going to help productivity. It is not going to help with the high value questions. So I hope, and we will probably hope, to have ChatGPT supporting the workflow of people. I think every SaaS product is going to have just ChatGPT in somewhere in a year's time. It's not going to be a differentiator. It's going to be supporting different organizations. Everyone's going to have that help in their workflow, and it will make things more productive. It will not help you go the extra. It will not help you necessarily solve the high value problem, which is where I think data teams should be going. So it's a good thing, I think. It will make you get to outcomes faster, but you still need to have someone who's doing the critical thinking, the problem solving, and that is really difficult. And that's where analysts can still thrive.
And I also, I mean, I wonder about it. Like ChatGPT can be so spectacularly wrong,
Oh yeah,
and confidently wrong. Like it's very convincingly incorrect.
yeah.
And what I
That,
just go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, to add on to that, that's why I think it's going to, before it replaces any data analyst or anything like that, it's going to, because of what you said, it being wrong a lot of the time, that, like, right now, like any Chat GPT that's implemented, like, the end user wouldn't necessarily be able to trust it, right? So if the business user can't trust it, then they can't just ask questions. So I don't think the end user is going to like cut out the data analyst and just start asking questions directly because of that. Maybe as the technology evolves, that will happen. But what I think is going to happen, like in the immediate short term, is that data analysts are going to be able to use that to just to cut down the time it takes them to answer those questions, right? So because like the data analysts, they know the data, they can see if that's good or not, but instead of taking half their day, 2 hours of the day to answer their questions, they can get 80% of the way there asking a single question to Chat GPT, and then they can tweak it as they need, and then maybe they have the rest of the day to try to start doing that more high value stuff that you were talking about, Ollie, and kind of showing that and trying to prove that like they're valuable, right? So like I don't think they're getting cut out by Chat GPT yet. I think it'll help them, but I mean, long term, I was shocked when I saw Chat GPT, and like I'm just wondering what's the next thing that shocks me when I see it is going to be ludicrous.
Yes,
like the next leap, because like Chat GPT was a leap I wasn't expecting. Like, what's the leap after that I'm going to be like, holy smokes? I think once that happens, maybe we need to start sweating. But like right now, I don't think there's an incredible threat. But I mean, the way things evolve so quickly that. Maybe it will be a threat soon. I don't know.
It's just I don't think I'm ever threatened. I don't think anyone should be threatened by it. I think it's just a way of evolving productivity. It's just going to make what you do high level function work. That's what it's going to be great for. As you say, Eric, it's going to make your time to get to an answer faster. If we can get more answers, you can get to better. You can spend more time getting to a better quality answer because time is quality is often a function of time, and that function is now better. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating, but it's not. If data teams are thinking about problem solving, they will always be valuable. They will always be valuable, and I think that's really the mantra of like, am I solving problems that matter, and I'm helping someone make a decision better. You can't go wrong. I really think that's true.
It is shockingly better, I think, and will be shockingly better than the attempts to introduce natural language query into BI tools up to this point. They have all been. They suck. And and maybe this one will not suck. And so that will be a step forward.
I think that's, well, I'll give you a story about this. So actually, when Ollie and I first found an account with a friend of ours, Ed, we actually looked at natural language querying as our first sort of prototype. We tried to play with natural language. And obviously we didn't do it anywhere near as well as ChatGPT. But we actually found that the problem of it wasn't how we made it very good. And it could do a lot of answers, lots of questions, but people just didn't trust the results. The black box problem is the problem with natural language querying, is that people get an answer and they go, cool, sales going up, but do I trust how this was made? What's the methodology? And I think that is the challenge why analysts are always important, because it's the critical thinking, it's the methodology which helps people trust what you've done. And that's where that's the big risk of ChatGPT. You don't know how it's got to the answer it's got. And that's really difficult.
Yeah. Yep, that's why we're not getting replaced yet.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast last night. I didn't realize this, but apparently all large language models have a very hard time doing arithmetic where you have to carry numbers. Like they just fail. And like it's such a basic thing, but you think about it in the context of a BI tool, that might be pretty important. If you're asking it to do calculations for you and it like struggles with or multiplications. What was it they were talking about? Multiplication with more than 4 digits, right? It's just like the large language model does not have enough data points in order to effectively handle that, which was surprising to me. But it just, there are going to be ways in which they fail that I think will get people in trouble. Now, one thing I'd be interested. You mentioned earlier that, in the next year, every SaaS product is going to have some GPT integration. So at that point, is it just going to be table stakes? Like this is not a differentiator anymore?
Well, execution matters a lot, doesn't it? I think that it will be table stakes, and there will be ability, like there is, like the way you can build a chart matters. In all BI tools, like there is a degree of competitive advantage if you can do that well. So I think it's both. I think like any feature, it will be a feature, and it'll be a feature which needs to be in the tool, and everyone's going to have it. Doing it well could be a doing it badly is obviously going to be it's going to be a big problem. But I suspect the power of it ultimately comes down to the quality of the model, which for most people is going to be the same model. So it's going to be interesting to see how he'll differentiate on that, I think. I think the challenge will be how much can you get the model to solve even more larger chunks of your workflow. That's the real interesting part of it. Like just getting to a SQL query from a natural language question is probably going to be not where the differentiation is going to be. It's probably going to be in how much can I just get you to build my entire workflow from scratch. And that's going to get really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so final few questions. And if you're watching live and you have any final questions or comments, get them in now because we're approaching the top of the hour and we'll be wrapping on time today is the goal. And so,
really fast.
Yeah, so get your final questions in, folks. So really, I guess the last thing I'm wondering is just where do you think things are going as far as what's up next as far as BI and analytics is concerned? What are the problems that we need to be thinking about looking forward and the ways that we need to change the way we work? For example, the collaborative, I think you've made a really strong argument for collaboration needs to be a key element of what your data team does. Is there anything else that you would say a data team needs to do here in March of 2023 to prepare for the changes that are coming in the next few years?
I think that's a good question. There are a lot of things which the solution for is already available. There are, if you're using an old school BI tool, like as you say, like ones that've been around for 20 years, there's a lot of gain just from moving to collaboration because it just shortens your workflow enormously. I think that's a big shift. I really hope I can only tell you what I'm pitching for, which is to have a much more problem-solving oriented workflow for BI teams. That is a cultural shift, which I'm really excited about. I think AI will make a big. We talk about AI. AI will be a big change. It'll be probably gradual. I think that's the approach. I think it was going to work well, particularly in data. But I don't know. I don't really see. There's a lot of these threads already existence, right? It's just going to be more of the same. There's still a lot. The generation is just getting going. This whole thing about dashboards are dead. Dashboards are still predominantly, by country mile, the most heavily used medium for which to communicate insight into an organization. Still, we're just at the start of this journey. It's a wholly evolving topic, and I can't quite see the end of it. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. Like it's going to change a lot, even in the course of the next few years. What the trends you can already see. Beyond that, I have no idea, but I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Okay, so real quick before we wrap up, one last plug from our sponsors, us, the Super Data Brothers. So, if you're wrestling with these types of issues, you're trying to figure out how do we structure our analytics front end. It's a lovely shirt, Eric. How do we structure our analytics front end to be more collaborative, deliver more value? That is something that we can help with using tools like Count. We're big Count fans. And so reach out to us and let us know. You can get a hold of us at Ryan@superdatabrothers.com. So just reach out to me directly. Ollie, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. Where can people find out more about you and Count?
You can find me. We can find us at count.co and count.co. And you can email me at ollie@count.co. If you want to get in touch.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
awesome.
I think we've got a few minutes left, don't we? We can talk about some people's comments. What time is it? 50. We got like 3 minutes.
Okay, so Paul says, I think AI will be a differentiator when it can start doing its own predictive analytics as data is loaded into the system and raise red flags when outliers are detected and explain what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be...
That's when we need to start sweating.
That is true. That is a very good point. I think there's a lot to be said about that. I think the idea of going to a dashboard to see your numbers today, it feels the wrong way around, doesn't it? It should be pushed to you, and you should be told when things are happening that are meaningful. That's clearly a huge productivity win that could be happening here. I think
Now that
great.
was recently a feature, obviously not the whole AI piece of it, but a feature you recently added to Count.
Correct. I feel like Paul's a plant, but he's not. I think I've met Paul, but I'm looking forward to meeting him at some point. Yeah, good shout. Thanks, Ryan. You're much better at this than me. I should be plugging my own tool more than you are.
Here we got on the fence with AI, like the IoT. Thanks, Data Bros. It's been a great session. Thanks for coming, Anthony.
Yeah.
And then friend of the show, Ralph. I wonder what this means for data analysis like fraud detection. Good question. I don't know yet.
Yeah. Well, one thing it's going to, on one hand, the AI might help detect fraud. On the other hand, ChatGPT is going to greatly help people who are doing fraud. So,
Yeah.
ability to generate, I don't know, a nice paragraph, a decent enough paragraph, decent enough copy about anything you want. It's like, well, you can think of 50 different scams in one day.
I wonder if you can ask it.
Other show, Eric. Is it other show?
Yeah. You probably can.
All right. Okay, so cool. Well, let's go ahead and wrap it. Again, thank you, Ollie, for joining us. Really appreciate you coming on. Great conversation. Go ahead and check out count.co. If you liked what you saw today, or get a hold of Ollie at count.co. And of course, you can always reach us. Connect with us on LinkedIn. Follow us on YouTube. If you've been watching on LinkedIn today, why don't you do us a favor? Hop over to YouTube and give us a like, comment, and subscribe to help us grow the channel and get the Super Data Brothers message out there to more people. So until next week, we will see you then. We got a really great show, by the way. Ollie, I think you're fans of the Tech Bros. They will be joining us next week, and so that should be a. It'll be a spicy show, no doubt.
No doubt.
No doubt. All right. Take care, everybody, and we will see you next week.